Hi and welcome. My name is Justina, and today we are going to talk about how to pass ACCA SBR, Strategic Business Reporting. If you are working towards ACCA qualification, you already know that SBR is not optional. It is one of the two compulsory papers in strategic professional level, alongside SBL, so no matter which option paper you choose, SBR is something every single ACCA student has to pass. And it has a reputation of being one of the toughest. The syllabus is enormous. The approach is completely different from anything you have studied before. And a lot of students seriously underestimate how much their mindset need to shift from FR. So in this video, we are going to cover exactly what that means in practice, how to approach your studies, what techniques actually work for SBR, and how to build a practice strategy that gets you to pass marks. The video combines expert tuition from Lilia, our lead SBR tutor here at Practices Academy, and the face behind all the SBR content, and additional exam insights and analysis to give you a complete picture. I'll be back at the end to wrap things up, but for now, let's get into it.
Hi, let me talk about the study timeline and approach. So I teach people individually, I teach people using courses, and I can tell you that each and every exam is different. And if, for example, you were to take an AFM exam and you would come to me for individual classes, I would tell you, oh, no problem. It can be 15 classes, an hour and a half each, and you would pass. That is not the case with SBR. SBR is one of the most voluminous exams. And just look at it. Look at the syllabus. We have more than 40 papers. We have more than 40 IFRS / let's say, management commentary, sustainability reporting, and so on. And that is quite a lot to study. So this means that if you're starting with a course, then it will take you something like 80 hours to look at the theory and some basic examples. If you are doing self-study route, most likely it's going to be 120. Why? Because when you self-study, it's a little bit harder to follow the idea, and sometimes you have to read and read again and so on. And there is less motivation because if you have a video, then this means that you are engaged with it somehow. So that's quite a lot, right? And on top of that, you need to practice. So ideally, you should study 3 months before the exam. As soon as you sit your previous exam, you need to start planning how to pass the next session. Don't wait till the results day. So how do we study for this very exam? It is important that you mix, that you study theory and you enhance it with short practice. But also it is important that you have revision cycles, meaning that after you have studied the theory, after, let's say, 5 to 7 days have passed, you need to open a big question from past papers and practice it again. And we want to spend as much time as possible on practice, but we can't ignore the theory. That is not something that you can just invent. You can't reverse engineer the knowledge. You need to learn the standards, unfortunately. So if you're studying with a course, then you need to allocate 80 hours of study time for theory, taking into account that some of the videos will need to be rewatched. Some of the videos, like hygiene, probably will need to be rewatched several times. And make sure that you have at least 100 hours to practice. And that is how it works. And start practicing as soon as possible in order to pay attention to whatever is the most important in respect of this each and every individual standard, so that your brain focuses on whatever needs to be learned. And that's it. That is how it works.
You probably smashed financial reporting. You feel like you know your standards, but then SBR just feels like it's written in a completely different language. If that's you, you're not alone. And the reason for it is actually simpler and way more fundamental than you might think. And this quote right here, it gets right to the heart of the matter. This exam is not just FR on steroids. The number one trap students fall into is trying to study for SBR using the exact same methods that got them through FR. You can't. It's a whole new ballgame requiring a complete shift in your mindset. So let's dive into that trap. The very skills that made you so successful before, things like memorization, precise calculations, applying really clear rules, those skills can actually hold you back here if you don't change your approach. And this misconception, it sends so many students down the completely wrong study path. You end up spending hours and hours trying to memorize every detail of every IFRS standard. But here's the thing. The exam isn't asking what the rule is, it's asking how and why it applies in a messy, ambiguous, real-world scenario. And trust me, memorization just can't prepare you for that. So to really succeed in SBR, you have to fundamentally change how you think about reporting. It's time to stop thinking like a technician and start thinking like a professional advisor. Let's break down what that really truly means. You can see the evolution perfectly on this slide. In financial reporting, it was all about applying clear rules, right? You calculated goodwill, you prepared a set of accounts, done. But strategic business reporting, it's all about applying professional judgment. Often there isn't one single right answer. The real marks, are in your ability to evaluate different options and justify your reasoning with a clear, compelling narrative. I love this image because it's a great way to visualize that mental shift. Think of all your technical knowledge as the foundation on one side of a canyon. Your exam success, and your future career, by the way, is on the other side. SBR is that bridge. It's the professional judgment you have to build to connect the two. Please, burn this into your brain. A calculation without any context or explanation is worth next to nothing in this exam. The examiners want to see you explain the why. They want to see you discuss the principles, talk about the economic substance of a transaction, and show that you understand how your accounting treatment actually impacts real stakeholders. Okay, so now that we've got the mindset sorted, let's get practical. Where should you focus your technical study? I mean, the syllabus is huge, but some areas carry massive weight and are pretty much guaranteed to show up. Let's start with the most important number in this entire exam, 30. That's right, 30 marks, almost a third of the entire paper, all wrapped up in question 1, which will always be on group accounting. You simply cannot pass SBR if you haven't mastered this area. Consolidations, disposals, foreign currency, it's all in there. Mastering this isn't just a good idea, it is the absolute, non-negotiable foundation for a pass. Now, beyond group accounts, these are the other heavy hitters. Financial instruments, revenue, and leases. These are all complex, principles-based standards that are designed to make you apply your judgment. They come up constantly. And don't forget ethics. Ethics isn't some standalone topic you can cram at the end. It's a professional thread that's woven through every single scenario you're going to face. So what happens when you get a transaction that's so new or so weird that no specific standard covers it? Well, that's where the conceptual framework comes in. Think of it as your safety net. Don't just memorize it. You need to understand its core principles, assets, liabilities, recognition, so you can reason your way to a sensible conclusion right from scratch.
If you just come from the fundamental level, from the skills level, and your brain is actually tailored to attempt multiple choice questions, then you will have to change your technique. Because before, when you studied standards for financial reporting, for diploma in FRS, you were supposed to study them from the perspective of recognition, from the perspective of the basic understanding. That is not how it works for SBR. So we actually need to learn the standards, not just read them. But how do we do that? We need to break down sentences into logical arguments. So for example, if we're talking about IFRS 13 fair value, then we can't just read the fair value definition, so that this is the price that will be paid or received and so on. We can't just read in order to say, oh, okay, I understand the meaning. That's not how it works. You need to break down the definition into logical arguments. So it has to be between the market participants. So we can't take the fair value estimation based on, let's say, a subsidiary and the parent trade. It has to be at the measurement date. Oh, so we can't take something that was measured half a year ago. And it has to be an orderly transaction. So, for example, if there are two companies that trade together, so one, let's say, gives the other land and the other gives equipment, this is not an orderly transaction, so we can't use the fair value. So, you need to understand the logical arguments and when these arguments work and when they don't. You also need to develop a skill of reading the question and see what is wrong with the question. What is that is sticking out? So the basic example would be the words such as all, never, always, and some other words and some other clues. So for example, if you know that the question is about previous period, that is an invitation to use IS8 basis for preparation. If you see the next date, so after the reporting period, this is IS10 and you need to talk about adjusting and non-adjusting events. It is important for you to understand that this is a huge exam. The syllabus is enormous. So please make sure that you use a paper, that you draw mind maps, that you leave notes, because otherwise you will just have a mess of knowledge. And that is how it works. That is how you study for SBR to pass.
So we've established SBR is a whole different ballgame. But how does that change how you study? Well, that brings us to the big moment, moving from just learning the theory to actually practicing exam questions. Getting this transition right is everything. So when do you make that jump? The signal isn't when you've memorized every single rule in the book. Nope. The turning point is when you understand the principles, the why, behind those rules. That deeper understanding is your superpower. It's what lets you tackle any weird scenario the examiner decides to throw at you. And practice doesn't just mean doing a few questions here and there. To do it right, you have to recreate the exam. Get on that ACCA practice platform and do full questions under timed conditions. Write out complete answers, not just little bullet point plans. Your main focus should be applying what you know to the little details in the scenario. And then you've got to be your own harshest critic and mark your answers ruthlessly. Okay, listen up, because this next bit, it might just be the most valuable part of this whole explainer. What do the markers, the people with the red pens, actually want to see from you? Getting inside their heads is the key to unlocking that pass. Let's take a look. First, let's get super clear on what gets you 0 points. Examiners do not want to read definitions you copied from a textbook. They don't want calculations with no story to explain them, and they absolutely hate generic answers that could be about any company on the planet. These are the classic mistakes that cost people the exam. So what's the secret sauce? What do they reward? It is all about application. You have to weave the specific names, dates, and numbers from the scenario right into your answer. They want to see your professional judgment, your structured thinking, your reasons for every conclusion, and your ability to see the bigger picture for stakeholders. This is where you earn the real marks. And finally, let's talk about a special part of the score that rewards these high-level skills, the professional marks. We're talking about 4 marks that are given for how you say something, not just what you know. There are exactly 4 professional marks up for grabs. Now, I know what you're thinking, only 4, that's not much. But trust me, those 4 marks are absolute gold. So often, they're the razor-thin difference between a 49 and a 53. They're critical. And you find these marks in very specific places. You'll get 2 in question 2 for how well you handle the ethical problem, and another 2 in question 4 for the clarity and quality of your stakeholder analysis. They're a direct reward for showing you have professional polish. So, as we wrap this up, I want to leave you with a question to really think about. Based on all this, are you studying the right way to pass? Are you just memorizing rules, or are you actually building the skills of application, judgment, and communication? Because making that shift from being a knowledge gatherer to a professional advisor, that is the single biggest strategic move you can make. Start today, and you'll be on your way.
Now let's discuss practice strategy. First of all, when do we start practicing? We start practicing as we read theory. These has to be short examples that are going to be implemented in your learning process. Also, you need to make sure that you attempt at least 1 full question each and every week. And it's important to allocate at least 2 weeks before the exam date. Of course, it would be great if you could have allocated 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and so on, but let's be realistic. How do you learn from practice? Well, it would be great if you could have opened examiner's report, because it would highlight whatever is the most important. What are the mistakes that people make? This is especially vital for discursive questions, because in there, when you open marking scheme, you will see that it looks like 1 mark per relevant point, and quite often you don't know whether your point is relevant or not. It would be great for you to attempt a mock. You may run super fast for 100 meters, but it's a different thing when you have to run 10, 20 kilometers, right? And if you were practicing to run half a marathon or a marathon, you would need to run this distance. You would need to learn how to spread your strength, how to spread your energy. Totally the same idea applies to questions in SBR. We have to practice on the timed conditions. And I do understand that it's not always the case for many of you because you have lives, you have work, you have families. But I trust that you can find these 3 hours and 15 minutes to practice, at least once. What would be important? It is vital for you to leave time codes. So when you started a question, when you finished a question, and do that for each and every sub-question you attempt. That will allow you to learn many things about yourself, whether your speed increases or decreases as you go. That would impact your time allocation. You would know, for example, that you need to speed up at the start of the exam because later is going to be much harder for you to earn marks. Or you would stop panicking if you can't do anything at the start because you know that usually you earn marks closer to the end. It will also show you what are the topics that are the most time-consuming for you, which is important to practice, so to overcome this weakness. But also, it would be important for your exam planning, because we need to start with low-hanging fruit first. And if you know that this is what drains your attention, what drains your time, then probably you should schedule closer to the end of the exam. How many marks do you need to do before the real exam? Well, of course, the ideal answer is as many as possible. I would suggest that you do 2, because the first mark would be needed just for you to understand where you stand. And the second mark would be needed to take whatever you have learned, apply it. So let's say apply different time management, apply different techniques, and see if it indeed works or doesn't work. And that is how you practice.
So, there you have it. Everything you need to know about how to approach ACCA SBR from your study timeline and techniques all the way through your practice strategy. If there's one thing that I want you to take away from this video, it is that SBR is not FR with more standards. It is a completely different exam that rewards a completely different way of thinking. The sooner you make that shift from memorizing rules to applying professional judgment, the sooner everything starts to click. Now, if you want to go deeper and actually put all that into practice, we have a full SBR course here at Practices Academy. And it's actually taught by Leah. It covers all the standards in details, includes practice questions, and gives you the structured approach that you need when you walk into the exam room and you are confident. The link is in the description below. And if you found this video helpful, please give it a like. It actually helps other ACCA students find this content. Subscribe if you haven't already, because we have a lot more SBR content coming, including a video dedicated entirely to the most common mistakes SBR students make and how to avoid them. It's coming up soon, so make sure you still subscribe so that you don't miss it. Good luck with your studies, and I'll see you in the next video.